We've taken some steps in terms of, major steps in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We know that there's more to be done. We've agreed that we need to work with Quebec.
The cost of putting a price on carbon has come up. Nobody talks about the cost of not fighting climate change. This cost is passed to citizens too, whether it's healthcare, coastal erosion, spectacular weather events, as we now have to be used to. This is hugely expensive for our society. The cost of doing nothing is much more.
You know, if you listen closely, you can actually hear your wallet emptying out if you live in the province of Quebec or the province of Ontario. What they just said there was that you're going to be spending money, a lot more money, on things not many of us understand. Kevin Godet is here to put them in perspective for us. I find this all very rich and something that's going to make me very poor at the end of it all. What's going on here?
Well, welcome to the modern world of governments who have overspent for way too long. And at some point, the chickens come home to roost, and politicians who have such a poor track record of ever reducing or putting constraints on their spending invariably come back to folks like you so they can pull more cash out of everybody's wallets. So they had their joint cabinet meeting on Friday, Quebec and Ontario, to talk about what they could do together. And not surprisingly, the key driver out of that meeting was an agreement to work on what they would say is saving the planet, which is really just code for finding more ways to take cash out of our pockets through carbon taxes.
Yeah, I call these things Trojan taxes. You know, whether they're road tolls that they say will decrease congestion out there, or whether they're carbon taxes that will save the planet, they put them in these nice fuzzy horses that ride up to our gates and says, can you pay a little for this? And then when you open the inside, it's just basically a tax. And when it comes to the carbon tax, if you look at places like Australia, these are taxes that don't work. They don't even do what they say they're going to do.
They've never worked anywhere for the measures that they say they're supposed to be. It's actually an interesting phenomenon of modern political marketing where they've done a good job of adopting the emotional language that works in the public, where they tap into the emotionality. They put up, kids and polar bears, and they say that if you don't pay more, that somehow there'll be fewer polar bears and your kids aren't going to have a planet to live on. Therefore, they should add 7 cents a liter on your gas tax. They should impose a massive new carbon trading scheme on businesses, which drastically damage businesses. And then they just smile, pocket the cash, increase spending on programs, and go on their merry way.
Yeah, and when it comes to a carbon tax, if they add it to the price of gas, let's say, which they very well could do, or they do put a tax on business, these are things that have the ability and have proven to trickle down to everyday consumers. And for people watching at home who are thinking, well, that's not going to impact me, the answer is wrong. It's going to impact you every single day, not just when you're at the gas pumps.
Well, gas is a good example because, you're a two-car family at a tank a week at $50 a tank. Suddenly you add 2 cents a liter more, 5 cents a liter more. Now you're an extra couple $100 a year. That's the cost of your kid's hockey program or your daughter's ballet program. Now, what's interesting about this is Quebec just commissioned former Liberal cabinet minister Lucienne Robillard to undertake a study of how they could deal with their deficit, and she issued a report. It's interesting because she talks about some measures to reduce spending by $2.3 billion in the province. This is the type of thing that Don Drummond did a few years ago for Ontario, commissioned to come up with this report, make a whole bunch of recommendations on what government should do to get spending under control. The Drummond report's sitting getting dusty. Instead, we see Ontario government talking about other ways to raise revenues, tools, taxes. So the question then will become, what will the Quebec government do with this recommendation from Lucienne Robillard? Will it just sit on a shelf like all these reports for spending constraints do?
Yeah, and this is the problem. You don't need reports. And with all due respect to Robillard and to Drummond, you don't really need reports. Guys like you and I have been talking about this for years. It's very simple, folks. Tighten the belts. Make sure that you're not paying bloated wages to the unions. Tighten that public sector. Make sure there aren't redundancies. Make sure that the programs you're spending money on are good ones and that you're getting every penny's worth. And for the ones that you're not getting good return, you cut them. You cut them till they don't exist anymore if necessary, because you don't have the ability to spend on luxury items. And things that are exploratory, things that we're not getting a return on, those are things that we don't necessarily need in the now. How hard is that? Put it on a piece of paper, send it to the Premier, we're done here.
Apparently it's a lot harder than you and I would think. Common sense isn't so common. It's interesting, you see protests in Detroit by police officers who are proclaiming at the possibility of reduced police presence. And they're basically protesting in an effort to save their pensions because it's under a bankruptcy consideration. And the problem there is that politicians made promises, overspent on pay packets and pensions, and then people left the city, which meant there were fewer taxpayers to pay this long-term liability. So politicians didn't look down the road. They made spending promises as if government money was always going to magically increase at huge levels. The fact of the matter is sometimes that just doesn't hold true, and these are the consequences. The cupboards are bare. Unions just say the taxpayers and businesses should pay more, but at some point you just can't get blood from a stone.
When it comes to the politicians themselves, let's say Kathleen Wynne, for example, in the province of Ontario, does she realize, because she's a smart lady, I'm going to give her credit for being a smart lady, does she realize that what she's saying is basically putting her hat out and extending it to everybody and saying, please give me some more, please put some more money in the hat, and realize at the same time that they do have a spending problem, or is she just out to lunch on the fact that they've overspent?
Short answer is I don't know. I worry.
What does your gut tell you?
I worry that she's genuinely out to lunch or knows but doesn't care, that somehow magic will happen. It's not my problem. 4 years from now, things will just get better. You know, happy talk and all, you know, rose-colored glasses, and kick the can down the road. 4, 6, 8 years she won't be around. Somebody else will be in power. And one of the things she does is they're borrowing tons of money in bonds to pay for these green bonds for transit. And that's easy for her because it's money that goes onto a balance sheet. It doesn't show up in the annual deficit, and the only money you pay on it is your interest rates, and then the coupons come due years from now. So she can borrow.
Well, after she's out of power.
Exactly. So it's balance sheet money. She doesn't worry about it. You don't have to pay the $1 billion back, multi-billion dollars back for years, and she can just smile and hope that somehow somebody else figures out a way in the future to solve that problem.
So if we're just going to put a little summary on all of this at the end here, we're going to have a carbon tax in Ontario. There's no doubt about it.
Well, there already is one, to be clear. I know you know that. It's going to just there's going to be probably two.
That's
probably going to be two. There's going to be probably a larger gas tax on top of our existing gas tax, which, by the way, is already 14 cents a litre on top of the Fed's 10 cents a litre, plus the GST, HST. They'll probably put in place more gas taxes and a cap and trade program on business. So you're going to see both.
Nifty. Thanks for all the doom and gloom, Kevin.
Monday morning.
Don't ever let those two people meet together in the same room. Kathleen Wynne and her Quebec counterpart, they should not be in the same room together. But thank you so much, Kevin. Good
Thank you.
We're going to